Case 1. Spring 2011, Kennedale, Texas. Brittany Collyps, a 29-year-old high school teacher and mother of three, was identified as the subject of an internal school investigation. Initial concerns surfaced after student rumors reached administrators regarding inappropriate behavior. School officials began reviewing reports quietly while attempting to determine whether the claims had merit. Within days, the matter escalated beyond administrative control, and law enforcement attention shifted toward Collyps and her conduct with students enrolled at the school. The case formally began after school administrators received multiple reports suggesting Collyps had engaged in inappropriate relationships with students. Following district protocol, the concerns were documented and forwarded to local authorities for review. Police were notified and initiated preliminary interviews to assess the credibility of the claims. Several students came forward during early questioning and confirmed interactions that violated professional boundaries. These confirmations prompted investigators to treat the situation as a criminal matter rather than an internal disciplinary issue. The allegations indicated repeated conduct rather than a single incident, raising immediate concern among officials. As information accumulated, investigators determined that the reported behavior potentially violated Texas law governing educator conduct. But the evidence emerging from early interviews did not align with any explanation of misunderstanding or rumor. Brittany Collyps had appeared to be a stable and established member of the community. Before entering education, she had served in the military, a background that contributed to her reputation as disciplined and responsible. She was married and raising 3 children while working full-time as a teacher. At Kennedale High School, she was entrusted with the instruction and supervision of students, a role that placed her in a clear position of authority. Parents viewed her as a safe and reliable educator, and students saw her as approachable. That authority, however, defined the seriousness of the allegations. Her professional responsibilities required strict boundaries, and those boundaries were now under scrutiny. It would take only days for her public image to unravel. Investigators expanded their inquiry by collecting formal statements from students who reported involvement. These accounts were compared for consistency and corroborated through digital evidence. Authorities obtained phone records and reviewed text messages and electronic communications linked to Collyps. The records revealed exchanges that supported the students, statements, and demonstrated ongoing contact outside appropriate educational settings. Investigators also examined timelines to establish when the conduct occurred and whether it overlapped with school enrollment. The scope of the misconduct widened as additional students were identified, confirming that the behavior was not isolated. Each new statement reinforced the developing case. Then, a review of digital communications clarified how the interactions had progressed beyond professional limits. Based on the accumulated evidence, prosecutors filed formal charges against Collyps. Texas law explicitly prohibited sexual relationships between educators and students enrolled at their school, regardless of the student's age. The statute focused on the imbalance of power inherent in the teacher-student relationship. During pretrial proceedings, the defense did not dispute that contact occurred, but emphasized the age of the students involved. Prosecutors maintained that consent was legally irrelevant under state law. The case proceeded to trial in 2012, where the evidence was presented methodically. Records, testimony, and communications established the pattern of conduct. When confronted with the evidence, the defense position failed to alter the legal outcome. In May 2012, Brittany Collyps was convicted on multiple counts of improper relationships between an educator and students. The court sentenced her to 5 years in prison. The decision generated mixed public reaction, with some questioning the length of the sentence and others emphasizing the importance of accountability. Collyps began serving her sentence shortly after conviction and was later released before completing the full term. Following her release, she withdrew from public attention. The case prompted statewide discussion regarding educator oversight, reporting mechanisms, and enforcement of professional boundaries. Years later, the case continued to be referenced in policy discussions, while the long-term impact remained debated. Case 2. 1997, Seattle area, Washington. Mary Kay Letourneau, a 34-year-old elementary school teacher, was arrested after giving birth to a child fathered by her 12-year-old student. The birth immediately triggered mandatory reporting and a criminal investigation. Medical records and witness statements confirmed that the relationship had not been isolated or brief. Investigators determined the abuse had occurred over an extended period. As details emerged, attention quickly shifted beyond the initial offense to Letourneau's continued behavior. Authorities became increasingly focused on her compliance with court restrictions, particularly as evidence suggested repeated violations of judicial orders intended to prevent further contact. The case formally began when law enforcement was notified of Letourneau's pregnancy in early 1997. Medical examinations confirmed that the child's father was a minor enrolled at the school where she taught. Police arrested Letourneau shortly afterward, and prosecutors filed statutory rape charges under Washington state law. The age difference and teacher-student relationship removed any ambiguity regarding legality. During the initial court proceedings, the pregnancy itself became a central piece of evidence, demonstrating that the abuse had progressed beyond isolated contact. Public attention intensified as details became known, and the case quickly moved from a local criminal matter to a national news story. The severity of the charges reflected the prolonged nature of the misconduct. However, the legal process soon revealed that the arrest would not be the final turning point. Mary Kay Letourneau had been born into a large Catholic family with political connections in Washington state. She was married and the mother of 4 children at the time of her arrest. As an elementary school teacher, she was responsible for supervising and educating young students, a role that required strict adherence to professional and legal boundaries. Her relationship with the victim began while he was under her direct authority at school. Investigators later established that the abuse had occurred repeatedly and escalated over time. The imbalance of power was central to the case, as Letourneau used her position to maintain access to the child. Her family life and professional standing contrasted sharply with the allegations, making the case particularly unsettling. It would soon become clear that her actions extended beyond the initial offense. After her arrest, Letourneau entered into a plea agreement that resulted in a reduced sentence and probation, rather than extended incarceration. A key condition of her release was a strict no-contact order with the victim. Authorities warned that any violation would carry severe consequences. Despite these restrictions, police later discovered Letourneau in contact with the boy, directly violating court orders. In 1998, she was found with him again, and it was confirmed that she was pregnant for a second time. This discovery demonstrated continued abuse despite judicial intervention. The repeated violations fundamentally altered the case, shifting it from one of initial leniency to one of defiance of the legal system. The court moved swiftly to respond. As a result of the probation violations, the original plea agreement was revoked. The court imposed the full prison sentence that had previously been suspended. Letourneau was ordered to serve more than 7 years in state prison. While incarcerated, she gave birth to her second child fathered by the victim. The sentencing marked a decisive shift in how the case was handled, emphasizing enforcement of court authority and child protection. The judge cited her repeated violations as justification for the harsher outcome. Letourneau remained in custody for several years, serving the majority of her sentence. Her release did not signal the end of public scrutiny or controversy surrounding the case. Following her release in 2004, Letourneau reunited publicly with the former student, who was now an adult. In 2005, the two married, a development that reignited national debate and media attention. The marriage was widely criticized and viewed by many as a continuation of the original abuse rather than a legitimate relationship. Despite public backlash, they lived together for years and raised their children. The case remained a reference point in discussions about sentencing, gender bias, and long-term consequences of abuse. In 2020, Kay Letourneau died of cancer at the age of 58. Her death closed the legal chapter but left unresolved questions that continued to divide public opinion. Case 3. 2005, McMinnville, Tennessee. Pamela Rogers Turner, a middle school teacher, became the focus of a criminal investigation involving a 13-year-old student. Concerns surfaced after reports of inappropriate conduct reached school officials and local authorities. What initially appeared to be a single allegation escalated quickly as evidence began to accumulate. Turner was removed from her classroom as investigators examined the claims. Within a short period, the case shifted from an internal review to a criminal matter. Authorities soon noted that the situation would not end with the initial charges, as Turner's conduct following her arrest drew further attention. The case formally began when school administrators contacted law enforcement after receiving credible information about Turner's interactions with a student. Police opened an investigation and interviewed individuals connected to the school. During these early stages, evidence emerged suggesting that the relationship had crossed legal boundaries. Turner was arrested in 2005 and charged under Tennessee law, which classified the conduct as a serious criminal offense due to the victim's age. The arrest marked a decisive turning point, removing her from her position and placing the case into the court system. At the time, officials believed the matter might conclude with a single prosecution. However, developments following her release would demonstrate that the case was far from resolved. Pamela Rogers Turner had built her career in education within the McMinnville community. She was married to a local coach and was viewed publicly as a stable and respected professional. As a middle school teacher, she was entrusted with the care and supervision of young students, a responsibility that required strict professional boundaries. Her role within the school placed her in daily contact with minors who depended on her authority and guidance. The relationship at the center of the case represented a clear breach of that trust. For parents and colleagues, the allegations challenged assumptions about safety and oversight within the school environment. It soon became apparent that the impact of the case would extend beyond the initial charges. Investigators expanded their inquiry by examining digital communications linked to Turner. Phone records, text messages, and electronic exchanges were reviewed and compared against student statements. The evidence confirmed ongoing contact that violated both school policy and legal restrictions. After her initial sentencing, Turner was released under probation with strict conditions, including no contact with the victim. Authorities later discovered that she had repeatedly violated these conditions. Each probation breach was documented and added to the case record. The continued contact demonstrated a pattern of disregard for court orders. These violations shifted the focus of the investigation toward enforcement and accountability rather than rehabilitation. As a result of the probation violations, Turner was arrested a second time. The court determined that she had failed to comply with the terms of her release and posed an ongoing risk. This led to the revocation of probation and the imposition of an extended prison sentence. Prosecutors emphasized that the repeated violations left no alternative under the law. The sentencing reflected not only the original offense, but also Turner's continued defiance of judicial authority. The case gained wider attention as an example of how probation violations can significantly alter legal outcomes. When confronted with the accumulated evidence, the court imposed additional years of incarceration. Turner was eventually released from prison in 2012 after serving her sentence. By that time, her teaching license had been revoked permanently, and her career in education was effectively over. The case continued to receive national attention due to the repeated arrests and the length of time it remained in the public eye. For the McMinnville community, the case prompted renewed scrutiny of school oversight and reporting procedures. Turner did not return to public life following her release, but her case remained cited in discussions about educator misconduct and probation enforcement. The long-term consequences extended well beyond the courtroom. Case 4, 2004, Tampa, Florida. Debra Lafave, a 23-year-old middle school teacher, was arrested following a report involving a 14-year-old student. The allegation quickly moved beyond the school setting and into the criminal justice system. Within hours of her arrest, the case attracted intense media attention due to Lafave's age, profession, and circumstances. News coverage spread nationally as details emerged. Public discussion intensified almost immediately, focusing not only on the alleged conduct, but also on how the case would be handled by the courts. The case began when the student's mother contacted law enforcement after learning about inappropriate interactions between her son and Lafave. Police initiated an investigation and conducted interviews to establish the nature of the relationship. The student provided information that confirmed repeated contact, prompting detectives to treat the matter as a criminal offense. Officers gathered initial evidence and documented statements before presenting the findings to prosecutors. Lafave was arrested shortly afterward and charged under Florida law, which classified the conduct as a serious felony due to the victim's age. The arrest marked a decisive shift from a private report to a public CR. Criminal case. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that the case would not be resolved quietly or quickly. Debra Lafave had recently begun her teaching career and was employed at a middle school in the Tampa area. She was married to a local law enforcement officer, a fact that intensified public scrutiny once the case became known. As a teacher, she was entrusted with supervising and educating students at a vulnerable age. The school environment required strict adherence to professional boundaries, particularly given the imbalance of power between teachers and students. Her background and personal circumstances contrasted sharply with the allegations. For parents and administrators, the case raised concerns about oversight and trust within the school system. The situation soon expanded beyond Lafave's personal conduct to broader questions about accountability in education. Investigators collected physical and testimonial evidence to support the charges. Statements from the victim were reviewed alongside corroborating information obtained during the inquiry. Prosecutors evaluated the evidence to determine the most appropriate legal strategy, weighing the strength of the case against the potential impact of a trial on the victim. The investigation confirmed that the conduct had occurred repeatedly rather than as a single lapse. As the case progressed, public attention continued to grow, and the prosecution prepared to pursue a resolution that would avoid prolonged courtroom proceedings. The evidence left little doubt regarding the violation of Florida statutes governing sexual conduct with minors. Rather than proceed to trial, Lafave entered into a plea agreement with prosecutors. Under the terms of the agreement, she pleaded guilty to reduced charges. In 2005, the court sentenced her to house arrest followed by probation instead of a state prison term. The sentencing decision sparked immediate debate, with many questioning whether the punishment reflected the seriousness of the offense. Prosecutors cited the desire to spare the victim from testifying as a key factor in the agreement. The court accepted the plea, finalizing the outcome. However, the resolution did not end public scrutiny or legal consequences. In the years following sentencing, Lafave struggled to comply fully with the terms of her probation. Authorities later determined that she had violated restrictions related to contact with minors. As a result, her probation was revoked, and she served a brief period of incarceration. By that point, her teaching license had been permanently revoked, and her marriage had ended. The case remained a frequent reference in national discussions about sentencing disparities and media influence. Long after the legal proceedings concluded, the controversy surrounding the outcome continued to shape public debate about justice and accountability. Case 5. 2014, Davis County, Utah. Brienne Altice, a high school English teacher, was arrested following allegations involving multiple students. Concerns emerged after reports suggested she had crossed professional boundaries with individuals under her supervision. School officials notified authorities, and the situation escalated rapidly. As the case developed, investigators determined that the allegations were not limited to a single incident. After Altice's initial release, authorities identified continued contact with a student, drawing further scrutiny. The discovery indicated that the matter would extend beyond the original arrest and lead to additional legal consequences. The case began when students disclosed information to school administrators regarding inappropriate interactions with Altice. These disclosures prompted an internal review, which was quickly referred to law enforcement. Police interviewed the students and documented their accounts, confirming repeated conduct rather than isolated behavior. The consistency of the statements led investigators to open a formal criminal case. Altice was arrested in early 2014 and charged under Utah law, which treats sexual conduct between teachers and students as felony offenses due to the imbalance of authority. The initial arrest signaled a serious legal response, but the investigation remained active as authorities continued to examine the extent of the misconduct. New information soon indicated the case was broader than first believed. Brienne Altice held a position of authority as a high school English teacher, responsible for instructing and supervising students on a daily basis. Her role placed her in regular contact with minors who were required to follow her direction and guidance. Within the school, she was viewed as personable and approachable, qualities that increased student interaction. However, those same dynamics highlighted the seriousness of the allegations. Utah law emphasized that consent was irrelevant in situations involving educators and enrolled students, the authority inherent in her position became a central issue as investigators evaluated the claims. The school community was left confronting the implications of a trusted teacher violating professional standards. As the investigation expanded, authorities identified multiple victims connected to the case. Additional interviews revealed that Altice's conduct had involved more than one student over time. Investigators also reviewed communication records, which supported the student's statements. After her release on bail, Altice was found to have violated court-imposed conditions by maintaining contact with a student. These violations resulted in new charges being filed. The added offenses demonstrated noncompliance with judicial restrictions and significantly strengthened the prosecution's case. Each development narrowed Altice's legal options and shifted the focus toward accountability rather than dismissal of charges. Facing mounting evidence and additional charges, Altice entered into a plea agreement with prosecutors. She pleaded guilty to several counts related to the misconduct. Under Utah's indeterminate sentencing system, the court imposed a prison sentence ranging from 2 to 30 years. The structure of the sentence placed responsibility for determining her release date with the parole board rather than setting a fixed term. The plea resolved the criminal case while ensuring incarceration. The sentencing underscored the seriousness of the violations and the consequences of breaching both professional and legal boundaries. Altice began serving her sentence in the Utah State Prison. In 2019, she appeared before the Utah Board of Pardons and Parole for review. After evaluating her conduct and statements, the board granted parole, allowing her release after several years of incarceration. The decision generated public reaction across the state, with some questioning the length of time served and others emphasizing the role of rehabilitation. The case prompted renewed discussion about teacher oversight, sentencing practices, and parole decisions. Although Altice was released, the consequences of the case continued to shape policy conversations in Utah. Case 6. 2015, Madison Heights, Michigan. Katherine Runk, a Spanish teacher at a private Catholic high school, was arrested after misconduct with a 15-year-old student was confirmed. The allegations centered on conduct that occurred within the school environment. Once administrators became aware, the situation moved quickly beyond internal review. The arrest drew immediate attention because of the setting and the age of the student involved. Authorities confirmed that the conduct violated both criminal law and professional standards. From the outset, the case focused on accountability within an institution built on trust. The case began after concerns were raised about inappropriate interactions occurring on school grounds. Administrators reported the matter to local authorities after confirming that the conduct had taken place inside school facilities. Law enforcement responded by initiating interviews and securing access to relevant locations within the school. Evidence gathered during the initial response confirmed that the misconduct was not accidental or misunderstood. The setting itself became central to the case, as the classroom was a place where students were expected to be protected. Once the facts were established, investigators determined that criminal statutes applied. The discovery prompted immediate legal action and removed Runk from her position while the investigation continued. The school was a private Catholic institution that emphasized discipline, safety, and moral responsibility. Students and parents placed significant trust in faculty members, particularly those responsible for daily instruction. The victim was a minor enrolled at the school and subject to Runk's authority as a teacher. That imbalance of power was a critical element in the case. The student's age and dependence on the school environment heightened the seriousness of the allegations. The institution's role in safeguarding students became part of the broader discussion. The breach of trust affected not only the victim, but also the wider school community. Law enforcement conducted a detailed investigation to establish the scope of the misconduct. Officers collected statements, reviewed school records, and coordinated with prosecutors to determine appropriate charges. As evidence was analyzed, the charges escalated to reflect the severity of the offense under Michigan law. Investigators confirmed that the conduct met the criteria for degree criminal sexual conduct. The case proceeded methodically, with authorities ensuring that the evidence met legal standards. Each step reinforced the conclusion that the actions constituted a serious criminal violation rather than a disciplinary matter. Runk ultimately chose to plead guilty to one count of degree criminal sexual conduct. The plea acknowledged alleged responsibility and eliminated the need for a trial. During sentencing, the court addressed the seriousness of the offense and the role of authority in the violation. The judge emphasized that the law applied equally regardless of gender and rejected arguments for leniency based on background or lack of prior offenses. The sentencing stance reflected a focus on deterrence and protection of students. The court's approach drew attention beyond the immediate case. Runk was sentenced to a term of 6 to 15 years in prison. The sentence was widely noted as an example of gender-neutral application of the law. The decision underscored that educators who abuse their authority face substantial prison time. For the school community, the outcome marked a painful chapter and prompted internal review of safeguarding practices. The case became a reference point in discussions about equal sentencing standards. Years later, it continued to be cited in debates about accountability and the responsibilities of those entrusted with educating minors. Case 7. 2014, Maplewood, New Jersey. Nicole DuFresne, a language arts teacher, was arrested after multiple students came forward with allegations of inappropriate conduct. What initially appeared to be isolated complaints quickly expanded as more information surfaced. School officials alerted authorities once the reports showed consistency. Within a short period, investigators identified a pattern rather than a single incident. The scope of the allegations shifted the case from internal concern to criminal investigation, placing DuFresne at the center of a rapidly developing inquiry. The case began when several students disclosed concerns to trusted adults, prompting school administrators to contact law enforcement. Detectives interviewed the students individually to assess credibility and consistency. Their accounts described repeated conduct that violated professional boundaries. Based on these disclosures, police obtained sufficient grounds to arrest DuFresne in 2014. The arrest was executed swiftly to prevent further contact with students. Authorities confirmed that the reported behavior met the legal threshold for criminal charges under New Jersey law. As the arrest became public, attention turned to whether additional students might have been affected. The early disclosures suggested the misconduct was not limited to a single victim. DuFresne worked within a school culture built on close teacher-student interaction and parental trust. As a language arts teacher, she maintained regular and sustained contact with students throughout the school year. Families relied on the school to provide a safe and structured environment. The allegations disrupted that trust, forcing parents to reassess assumptions about oversight and protection. Students involved were minors navigating an environment where authority figures held significant influence. The impact extended beyond the immediate victims, affecting classmates and families who struggled to understand how the conduct had gone unnoticed. The case underscored the vulnerability inherent in educational settings. Investigators expanded the inquiry by collecting detailed statements from students and reviewing available records. Each account was compared for consistency, and corroborating details strengthened the case. As interviews continued, additional students were identified, expanding the victim list. The growing number of disclosures confirmed a repeated pattern of misconduct over time. Authorities documented timelines and locations to establish the scope of the offenses. The accumulation of evidence shifted the case toward resolution through prosecution. By this stage, the investigation had established both the breadth of the misconduct and the necessity for decisive legal action. Facing extensive evidence and multiple victims, DuFresne entered a guilty plea. The plea acknowledged responsibility for the offenses and removed the need for a prolonged trial. In 2018, the court imposed a prison sentence of 15 years. The sentencing reflected the number of victims and the repeated nature of the conduct. Prosecutors emphasized that the outcome was intended to reinforce accountability and protect students. The court accepted the plea agreement, concluding the criminal proceedings while affirming the seriousness of the violations. DuFresne was committed to state prison to serve the 15-year sentence. The case prompted discussions within New Jersey about school oversight, reporting mechanisms, and prevention of educator misconduct. Policy conversations focused on early detection and stronger safeguards for students. For the Maplewood community, the case left lasting effects on trust and school culture. While the legal process concluded with sentencing, the broader implications continued to influence discussions about accountability and institutional responsibility in education. Case 8. 2018 Goodyear, Arizona, Brittney Zamora, a sixth-grade teacher, was arrested following evidence of misconduct occurring inside her classroom. The allegations centered on conduct that took place during school hours and within a controlled educational setting. Once concerns were raised, school administrators acted quickly to restrict her access to students. The arrest drew immediate attention because of the age of the student and the location of the incidents. Authorities confirmed that the evidence pointed to a serious breach of trust within the classroom environment. The case began after a parent reported concerns about Zamora's interactions with a student. School officials initiated an internal review and notified law enforcement once the information suggested potential criminal conduct. Administrators coordinated with police while ensuring the student's safety. Investigators interviewed the student and gathered preliminary information that supported the report. The school investigation confirmed that the conduct had not been incidental and required immediate intervention. Zamora was placed on leave while authorities continued their inquiry. The involvement of parents and school staff highlighted the importance of mandatory reporting procedures. As the findings were documented, the matter moved rapidly from an internal concern to a criminal case. Brittney Zamora was employed as a sixth-grade teacher and was regarded publicly as energetic and dedicated. Parents and colleagues viewed her as someone capable of maintaining a structured and engaging classroom. As an educator, she was entrusted with the care and supervision of young students during a formative stage of development. The school environment depended on a foundation of trust between families and faculty. The allegations disrupted that trust and raised concerns about student safety. The authority inherent in her role became central to the case, as the student involved was under her direct supervision. The situation forced the school community to confront the implications of misconduct by an authority figure. Law enforcement conducted a detailed investigation that included the review of digital communications linked to Zamora. Electronic records were analyzed to establish timelines and confirm the nature of the interactions. Investigators coordinated with school officials to determine when and where the conduct occurred. The evidence supported the student's account and demonstrated violations of both professional standards and criminal statutes. The institution responded by fully cooperating with authorities and implementing measures to address the breach. The findings left little uncertainty regarding the seriousness of the conduct. The case advanced toward resolution as prosecutors prepared formal charges. Zamora entered into a plea agreement with prosecutors rather than proceeding to trial. She pleaded guilty to charges related to sexual conduct with a minor. During sentencing, the court considered the location of the offenses, the age of the victim, and the abuse of authority involved. The judge emphasized the responsibility educators hold toward students. Zamora was sentenced to 20 years in state prison, with no possibility of parole under the terms of the agreement. The sentence reflected the gravity of the offenses and the need to protect children from harm. Zamora began serving her sentence following the court's decision. The outcome marked one of the most severe penalties imposed on a teacher in Arizona for similar conduct. The case prompted statewide discussion about safeguarding students and reinforcing accountability within schools. For the Goodyear community, the conviction underscored the consequences of misconduct in educational settings. Zamora's teaching license was permanently revoked, and her career ended. The sentence ensured she would remain incarcerated for decades, closing the legal proceeding while leaving lasting effects on the school system and public trust. Case 9, 2025, San Diego, California. Jaclyn Ma, a former Teacher of the Year, pleaded guilty to multiple counts involving elementary-age students. The case drew immediate attention due to her prior recognition as an outstanding educator. What began as a report concerning inappropriate behavior quickly escalated into a major criminal proceeding. Authorities confirmed that the allegations involved students under her supervision. The contrast between her public reputation and the charges placed the case under intense scrutiny. As proceedings advanced, the focus shifted from disbelief to accountability within the education system. The case began after an initial report was made to law enforcement raising concerns about Ma's conduct with students. Investigators responded by examining available information and securing evidence linked to the allegations. During this process, authorities uncovered materials that supported the report and indicated ongoing misconduct. The discovery prompted immediate action to prevent further contact with students. School officials cooperated with investigators as the inquiry expanded. The evidence established that the conduct involved minors of elementary school age, elevating the seriousness of the case. As findings were confirmed, prosecutors prepared formal charges. The situation moved swiftly from internal concern to criminal prosecution. Jaclyn Ma had been widely recognized for her work as an educator and had received awards highlighting her performance in the classroom. Parents and administrators viewed her as a role model within the school district. That public image stood in stark contrast to the conduct revealed during the investigation. The students involved were young and dependent on the school environment for safety and guidance. The imbalance of authority became a central issue, as Ma's position provided access and influence over vulnerable children. The revelations undermined confidence in the systems designed to protect students. The impact extended beyond the victims to families and colleagues who struggled to reconcile the allegations with her prior accolades. Investigators conducted a detailed review of digital materials connected to Ma. Electronic devices and records were examined to establish timelines and identify affected students. Through this process, authorities confirmed multiple victims and documented patterns of misconduct. Each finding reinforced the scope of the case and supported the charges filed by prosecutors. The investigation focused on ensuring that all relevant evidence was secured and that victims were identified accurately. As the inquiry concluded, the strength of the evidence left limited room for dispute. The case advanced toward resolution as prosecutors prepared for court proceedings. Faced with extensive evidence, Ma entered a guilty plea to multiple counts of child sexual abuse and related offenses. The plea eliminated the need for a trial and confirmed responsibility for the conduct. During sentencing, prosecutors emphasized the seriousness of the crimes and the abuse of trust inherent in her role as a teacher. The court considered the age of the victims and the pattern of behavior. The sentencing decision reflected a focus on deterrence and protection of children. The judge imposed a severe penalty, consistent with the gravity of the offenses. Ma was sentenced to a term of 30 years to life in state prison. The sentence was among the harshest imposed on an educator in California for similar conduct. The outcome prompted statewide discussions about oversight, reporting requirements, and safeguarding students in schools. Educational authorities reviewed policies to address vulnerabilities exposed by the case. Ma's teaching credentials were revoked permanently, ending her career. The legal proceedings concluded with a sentence that ensured long-term incarceration, leaving lasting implications for the education system and public trust. Case 10, 2024, Covington, Tennessee. Alyssa McCammon, a fourth-grade teacher, was arrested following allegations involving over 20 students. The scale of the accusations immediately set the case apart from prior incidents in the region. What began as a single report quickly expanded as authorities uncovered additional information. The arrest brought national attention to the small community and raised urgent questions about oversight within the school system. As details emerged, investigators focused on how the conduct had continued for years without detection. The case began after a tip was provided to law enforcement raising concerns about McCammon's behavior with students. School officials were notified and cooperated with authorities as the matter was reviewed. Initial inquiries revealed information that suggested the conduct was not isolated. As investigators interviewed students and reviewed records, the scope of the case widened rapidly. What was first treated as a limited inquiry soon developed into a large-scale investigation involving multiple victims. Law enforcement expanded resources to manage the growing number of allegations. Each new disclosure reinforced the seriousness of the situation. The investigation shifted from preliminary review to a full criminal case as evidence accumulated. McCammon had been employed in the Covington School District for more than a decade. As a fourth-grade teacher, she maintained daily, long-term access to students during formative years. Parents trusted her to provide a safe and structured learning environment. That trust was fundamental to her role and central to the impact of the allegations. The length of her tenure allowed prolonged access to students, which investigators later identified as a critical factor. The revelations disrupted confidence in the school system and left families questioning how the conduct had gone unnoticed. The breakdown of trust extended beyond individual victims to the broader community. Investigators documented accounts from numerous students and worked to corroborate timelines and locations. Forensic reviews were conducted to support the statements provided. Authorities also examined evidence related to a child born during the period of misconduct, confirming connections relevant to the case. Each finding added weight to the charges and demonstrated a pattern of behavior rather than isolated incidents. The investigation required coordination between law enforcement, forensic specialists, and prosecutors. As the number of identified victims increased, the case became one of the largest of its kind in the state. The evidence assembled left little uncertainty regarding the extent of the misconduct. Facing extensive evidence and numerous counts, McCammon entered a guilty plea. The plea resolved the criminal proceedings without requiring victims to testify in court. During the sentencing phase, prosecutors outlined the scale of the offenses and the prolonged misuse of authority. The court reviewed the evidence and the impact on victims and families. The sentencing phase focused on accountability and the need to protect students from further harm. The judge considered the number of victims and the duration of the conduct when determining the penalty. McCammon was sentenced to 25 years in state prison without the possibility of parole. The sentence ensured long-term incarceration and marked one of the harshest outcomes for an educator in Tennessee. The case prompted national discussion about detection, reporting, and safeguards within schools. Educational authorities reviewed policies in response to the findings. McCammon's teaching license was permanently revoked, ending her career. The outcome left a lasting impact on the Covington community and reinforced the consequences of violating trust in educational settings.